What you are aware of, you're in control of. What you're not aware of controls you. Because like, if you can't figure out why you can't do something, like, why can't I just be consistent? Why can't I lose weight? Why can't I do this or do that? Right. And we kind of beat ourselves up and shame ourselves. Self-awareness is the key to overcoming those things that we just can't figure out. And so going deep, doing the inner work and figuring out what is keeping us from doing these things that scare us. That's kind of, once we become aware of it, then we can control it, and then we can change that part about us. But until we become aware of it, it's going to keep controlling us.
So you have a passion for fitness and the desire to start your own business. But launching a massively successful fitness business is extremely complex. The systems, operations, hiring, firing, coaching, sales, and marketing are critical to success. Where do you even start? This show will give you the answers. Here is Bedros Keuilian and Bryce Henson, your hosts of the Fitness Franchise Podcast, a show dedicated to helping fitness entrepreneurs launch and grow successful gyms.
And Drew Manning, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bryce, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, man, super excited. I've been waiting to this for a while, and we got a lot of content to cover from your expertise as known from a celebrity trainer perspective, from fit to fat to fit. You're a big keto guy, so we're going to go through a lot of that today. But before the fit to fat to fit journey, give us the backstory.
Yeah, so a little bit about me before I got into fit to fat to fit. So I actually grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and we all played sports. Like I would play football and wrestling since I was a young kid. So I was always very fit. I was always very active. And so in 2009, I became certified as a personal trainer because that was kind of my passion at the time. So here I was, someone who had never been overweight a day in my life, trying to help people who were overweight pretty much the majority of their life. And I knew how to get fit. I knew the formula for that, but I couldn't understand why it was so hard for people just to do it. Like in my mind, it was so simple, so easy. And then there was a disconnect between me and my clients because I couldn't understand why they struggled so much just to be consistent. Because for me, it's like, you guys, it's simple. It's simple. Put down the junk food, go to the gym. Like, it's not that hard. And so I had a client tell me, you don't really understand how hard it is for me or for people like me, he said. And he's like, for you, it's been easy your whole life. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I don't know why it's so hard. And so it kind of got me thinking, like, maybe there's something I need to learn. And so I started thinking of ideas of like, okay, how can I better learn what it's like to go through this transformation? Like, why is it so hard for people? And then thinking of ideas, and boom, this idea popped up in my head, the fit to fat to fit. Like, what if you get fat on purpose and documented it? Like, would that give me a better understanding? And for some reason, a light bulb went off in my head. Like, yeah, and I felt almost called to do this experiment. And this was back in 2011, so quite a while ago. Mm-hmm. And that's where the idea of fit to fat to fit was first born. So that's a little bit of the backstory of fit to fat to fit, and it all stems from being in shape my whole life and never knowing any different.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to dive in more because I definitely want to unpack that and storytelling.
Yeah.
And a lot of our audience maybe has heard or known of you, and there's many that haven't. So we're going to dive deep. But before we do, just so I have clarity, it looks like, you were a fit guy growing up, et cetera, but doing a little bit of research, it seems like you went to University of Southern Virginia and you got a business degree. So how did, what was that backstory, and how did that kind of align in fitness? I guess you talked about it in 2009, but what happened prior?
Yeah. So before that, like in college, I played college sports, football. I played football there. I played football at a Division II school, at a junior college. I kind of hopped around to different colleges, to be honest with you. And, for me, fitness was a passion of mine, but I never had any intentions or plans of going into it from a professional perspective. I got my bachelor's degree in business management, went into finance actually with Chrysler, and was a financial analyst for the first 3 years of, post-college career. Right. And I was living in Illinois at the time, and, still worked out. It was interesting, Bryce, is I had friends that got married and they would just like let themselves go. And I'm like, man, why do people do that? Why do people just like become complacent and stop exercising and stop working out and stop taking care of their bodies? And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I always stayed in shape. I always made sure to work out. and stay healthy as much as possible, even though I was in the finance industry and sat in the cubicle in front of a computer, all day. And so that it was still a part of my lifestyle. And then in 2008, the economy crashed. We all know that. And the car company, Chrysler, that I was working for went bankrupt. So they bought me out. We moved to Utah, and I couldn't find a job to save my life. For 8 months, I was interviewing. I had a good resume, worked for a Fortune 500 company. But because the economy, couldn't land a job. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I had to think outside the box. Like, okay, how am I going to feed my family? Because I was married at the time. I was like, well, I could get certified as a personal trainer because that's something that will pay the bills and it's something I'm passionate about. So I went through NASM, got certified as a trainer, started taking on clients. What's funny is I would get clients through Craigslist. Like I would say, hey, $25 per hour. I'm the cheapest out there, but I'm, the best out there too. And so definitely undervalued myself, but I was just trying to get clients. And so I took on clients part-time while I was, looking for a job in the finance industry. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of the backstory.
That's interesting. And I think it's important to bring up because our audience are interested in fitness, but not all have fitness experience. So, business and entrepreneurship. So what would be, you have an incredible story, which we're going to unpack here in a second, but what would be maybe a recommendation or two for someone who maybe has a business background or interested in entrepreneurship, wants to get in the fitness industry, potentially open a gym or some sort of coaching program, but doesn't have the experience? Like what would be a couple of points of recommendation you'd have for them?
Yeah, obviously, there is the traditional route of getting educated and doing your research on which, certification would be the best for you. There's that route, but also learning to think outside the box. Like for me, a lot of my journey, my story has to do with thinking outside the box and trying something different because as you know, Bryce, the fitness industry is very, very saturated. Everyone's got abs, everyone's got muscles, everyone's got different workouts and different diets that they do. What makes you different? Like what makes you stand out from the rest? And that's really like a self-discovery process. And this is where, physical transformation, weight loss, or entrepreneurship, any type of transformation is going to require some type of knowing who you are and knowing what you bring to the table. And so there's a couple of things that really resonate with me, a couple quotes. And one is, let your mess become your message and let your, your hold on, I got to make sure I get this rhyme right. Let your stand become your brand. Like what you stand for becomes your brand. So tying in your personal, knowing who you are, tying in your personal beliefs, tying that into your brand, and also like your mess becoming your message, meaning what did you learn from your past, mistakes and errors and rock bottom moments that you can bring to the table now? Like, did you do the work and learn from those experiences, and what can you offer to the people you're trying to serve that is unique, that's different because of the experiences that you've been through? So thinking back to those experiences and maybe knowing yourself through those different phases of your life will help you know what you bring to the table, which sets you apart from everyone else. I think that's some advice I would go back and give myself when I did this, because I got lucky with a lot of the things that I did. But looking back, I was like, I had to think differently. I can't just think the same unless I want to be the same, unless I want to be just another trainer. But if you're looking to stand out, you got to find what makes you different, what sets you apart. And that really requires doing the inner work, and doing that self-discovery process is not easy. Like it's maybe going to therapy or life coaching or journaling, self-reflection, or, meditation. Those things are very important to me. And those are a part of that self-discovery process too.
Yeah. Love it. really sage advice. And, so I want to transition now into, kind of picking up where we left off in your story. So, back to fit to fat to fit, you had this idea, you're like, okay, I'm going to launch it. And for our audience who actually hasn't, watched your journey, can you walk us through that? And I know you've done it twice, so I guess we'll talk about the first time first. Like, what was the journey? I think you lost somewhere between 65 and 70 pounds. So kind of just unpack that whole experience.
Yeah. So I was married at the time. And I was pretty young. I was like 31. And, what's funny is I don't tell a lot of people this, but the original idea that I came up with was like, okay, I'm going to stop exercising and eat, standard American diet for a year, see how much weight I gain, and then try and lose it in another year. And luckily, my wife at the time was a lot smarter than I was. She's like, I think a year is too long. I think you should do 6 months. And so I was like, okay, 6 months is a good amount of time. So luckily, I'm glad that she convinced me to do 6 months, because Oh man, it was a long 6 months, and it was a really, really hard 6 months. So I'm glad I didn't do it for a year. But I was coming up with all these ideas by myself, because once I decided to pull the trigger on this, I was like, okay, I gotta start a website. So I went to squarespace.com, like, created my own website, which I didn't know what I was doing. I created my own YouTube channel, had a buddy of mine, like, who had a camera, film my first video. Created a Facebook page. And I remember back then you had to have like 25 likes or something before it went public or something like that. So, all these different things, and the social media was a different space back then. And so, that's kind of the genesis of like, okay, how I got started. And after a couple months, I was like, okay, I'm just going to document as much as I can, create my own YouTube videos and put it out there, and we'll see what happens. Maybe the local news here in Utah might pick it up. That was kind of my expectations. And I didn't have like a marketing strategy or any way to monetize this or any kind of ideas like that. And luckily, the story, it went viral. Like, I started, eating a standard American diet. I stopped exercising, told friends and family. They told friends and family. Before you know it, I had like 500 likes on Facebook. And then I started, going to like, Googling free press releases, right? Just like, okay, like get this word out there, and writing it myself. I didn't have a team or a copywriter or anything, just kind of like winging it. And before you know it, I got some local news to pick me up, and I got some podcasts and some bloggers who wanted to interview me. And one of them struck a chord with Yahoo, and Yahoo.com saw it on one of their subsidiaries, like Yahoo Shine or something, and it got good traction. And they're like, hey, we want to put this on the homepage of Yahoo.com. And I was like, sure, I don't know what that means, but okay. So the next day they went live with it, and my phone was blowing up. My website crashed. Every TV show out there was calling me and asking me to come on their show. Like, why is this trainer becoming obese? And then overnight, it was just like, okay, you're going to do this show. You're going to do this show. And I didn't have a manager at this time, or an agent, or a publicist. I just did this by myself. And I think the first show I did was Jay Leno, the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. So that shows you how long ago this was. But hopefully people listening still know who that is. But that was the first show I did. And then Dr. Oz called, and Good Morning America, and The View. And then a book deal happened. And, I gained 75 pounds in those 6 months. And it was one of the hardest, most humbling things I've ever done, because my identity was wrapped around my body image, and my body image was my self-image. So I was Drew the fit guy. So when I became overweight, I totally freaked out. I'll be totally honest with you. I did not like the way I felt, or I felt so uncomfortable being out in public. I wanted to go up to strangers and explain to them, like, hey, I'm not really overweight. This is just an experiment. Like, I'm just doing this on purpose. Like, I normally look this way. I wanted to explain to people and justify why I was overweight. But it taught me a lot. I learned a lot about identity and body image, and how I've attached my self-image to my body image my entire life, and how damaging that is, because the opposite of that is true, where people grow up their entire life overweight, out of shape, and so they are always the fat guy or the fat girl or the fat kid. And even when they lose the weight, their identity is still, no, I'm this obese person. And until they let go of that, a lot of people end up gaining the weight back, because that's their default mode. They go back to that identity of being the overweight person, and because we attach our self-image as our body image, unfortunately. And so it taught me a lot about the mental and emotional side of transformation, and that's where these aha moments and these lessons were learned. And that's what I think made people resonate with what I was doing, and made people want to pay attention and watch. It was like a train wreck. It's hard not to watch this whole thing happen. And I think that's what made Fit to Fit 1.0 so powerful, because you don't see that happen very often. You'll see some actors do it for roles, but they're getting paid millions of dollars, right? And this was a different mission. I was doing this to truly gain a better understanding of what it was like to be overweight, and hopefully inspire people in a weird sort of way. And those things came to fruition. I really did learn some valuable lessons, was humbled, wrote a book about it. The book became a New York Times bestseller. Luckily, I lost the weight, but I learned so many valuable lessons. And now my brand, Fit to Fit, is kind of a voice for more empathy for those that struggle with weight loss. And I feel like the fitness industry is an industry that lacks empathy. And so anyways, that's kind of the Fit to Fat Fit 1.0, what it entailed and a little bit about what I learned.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Drew, you don't know this, but Bedros, our mutual friend, kind of put us in touch. And when B and then myself, being the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, provide leadership and sales training, there's a book called Influence by Dr. Cialdini, and there's 6 weapons of influence. And one of them is likability, the other is authority, and another one is social proof. So those are 3 out of the 6. And Drew, you don't know this, like probably a little freak you out here, but actually I teach on those 3 topics, and I show your video on what this experiment has done in terms of like likability, because you talked about like one of the characteristics of likability is being empathetic, and I'm sure tons of people feel really drawn to you from that empathetic touch, and you become very likable for that. From the authority perspective, you've obviously you went through a whole transformation, so obviously you started fit, but then you actually went through the work and transformed yourself as you got fat and then back to fit. And then lastly, it kind of goes into the same line with social proof. So just there's so many lessons, from that in terms of just life lessons with sales and persuasion as well that I think really resonates with the audience. That all in mind, I want to dive deep a little bit more on identity, because that's just so powerful in any transformation. Yeah. So you unpack that a little bit, but what would you say, for someone listening to this right now who maybe doesn't have a ton of experience working with clients and getting them in shape and getting them fit, like what sort of work needs to be done in identity, and what are the tools, like how do you actually develop someone's identity when you're coaching or training them?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to defer to something that stuck with me from a good buddy of mine, Chris Powell, who had a TV show called Extreme Weight Loss on ABC, and we've become really close friends over the years. And he taught me something a technique that he used his clients on the show to help them, detach their body image from their self-image. And what he did is he had them come up with a different name for their body. And I can't remember what his name was, but he would call himself the Beast. Like his body was known as the Beast. So that was a part of his identity. It wasn't his identity. It was a part of his identity. And so in doing that, in naming your body a different name, if you will, and speaking to your body as if it's a different, part of you, then it kind of allows you to kind of visualize like, oh, I am not my body. My body's this other thing that is a part of me, but it doesn't define who I am. And I feel like that was a really, really powerful lesson for a lot of his contestants and clients, to detach from the self-image as the body image. And, so for me, I've used that technique as well. But I think, what it comes down to is doing a lot of the inner work. And for me, things like meditation have really helped me to realize who I really am. Behind all of this, like everything that we say, when we say I am, and you say I am your name, or I am, your gender, or what, these are all labels. These are all just labels. It doesn't really tell anyone who you are, but who we are at the core. And this is what I've learned from, things like meditation and reading a lot of books and talking to, life coaches and having a therapist, is we are the observer of everything that's going on. Behind all of this, we can observe our thoughts. We don't have to attach ourselves to our thoughts. We do naturally, but we can learn to detach and just see our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions as, kind of like clouds going by in the sky, or as a movie playing out in front of us. And we're just the observer watching it all. Like we are the thinker of our thoughts. We are the feeler of our feelings. And, that doesn't mean we are our feelings or we are our thoughts. We are that person behind it. And I think for me, that's wisdom in seeing that perspective, but it takes maybe some sitting in silence to learn how to do that. There's a really good book by Ryan Holiday called Stillness is the Key. And I think in our busy lives, we don't take the time to sit back and reflect and actually be the observer, because we're so attached to all the stimulus and we just react all day long. We're like a computer program just reacting, right? We're almost like robots in a sense, where we're just reacting, not truly aware or present in the moment. Yep. And I think that's why, for me, I teach people a lot about doing the inner work, like working in, not just working out. Like if you want to work out, cool, that's going to transform your body. But if you want it to last and become a part of you, working in is just as important as working out is to make that a lasting transformation. And so, that's why I'm a big proponent of tying in things like meditation and journaling and gratitude list into a physical transformation. Because if I give someone meal plans and workouts and supplements to take, yes, that's going to transform their body. Will that fix all their problems and make them happy? Absolutely not. It's not going to fix anything that they think it's going to fix, because people are looking at it as this thing that's going to bring happiness to their life. Like, once I have this body, once I lose this weight, then I'll love myself. Then people will love me. Then people will respect me. And yeah, sure, there's a temporary sense of fulfillment when we do achieve something hard like that. But I promise you that goes away really quickly. It's like winning the lottery or getting a bunch of money. Like, does that fix all your problems? No. Sure, it'll help out in a lot of ways, but it doesn't bring that lasting fulfillment that we think it's going to. And that's why people end up gaining the weight back in the long run, is because they haven't really truly fixed anything. They're looking for something to fill a void. And that void is not being filled because they're trying to fill it with external things like a new body or a new house or a new car or money. And that's the problem. We're chasing after these external things. Doing the inner work allows us to realize, like, oh, we fill that void in us. We can fill that void. We can provide ourselves with that happiness. We don't actually need it from these external things like we think we do. And learning how to do that is really hard because it takes deep work. Like I said, like meditating, journaling, therapy, life coaching, prayer, reflection, whatever it looks like for you. There's a lot of ways to do this. It's just as important, and it goes, hand in hand with exercise, diet, sleep, stress management, all the things we preach in the fitness industry. But the fitness industry just focuses on the physical aspect. And this is what I'm trying to change because of Fit to Fit 1.0 and 2.0 is switching people's perception of what success is and how physical transformation affects our mental, emotional, spiritual transformation, and tying those all together instead of going to the gym for physical transformation, going to church for spiritual transformation, going to a therapist for emotional transformation. Like, tying all those things together is where it really will stick with people and make a lasting transformation.
Dude, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
That's gold. That is gold. All right. Well, I want to dive into, you mentioned, a book, a best-selling book that you threw out there, which is Fit to Fat to Fit. And I think you wrote a second book, which I actually have on my desk right here.
Nice, son.
Come prepared. So would you be so kind just to kind of give our audience like high-level view actually on, the content and the big takeaways from both of your pieces of content? Would love to dive deep a little bit more there.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Bryce. Yeah. So Fit to Fat to Fit was the first book I wrote, which kind of entails my journey of gaining the weight and losing weight back in 2011, 2012, and all the lessons that I learned on the mental and emotional side. Complete Keto, I stumbled upon keto in 2015 or so when I had the opportunity to, or was listening to a podcast with Tim Ferriss and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, talk about all these amazing benefits of the keto diet. So I started doing my own experiments and my own research. And before you know it, I was on Dr. Oz again the second time. I went on once back for Fit to Fat to Fit 1.0. And then in 2016, I went on again, talking about the benefits of the ketogenic diet. And then from there, people started asking me questions. And I'm like, okay, I think I need to write a book about this. But I didn't just want to write another keto book and just talk about the science and how to do it and how to change your macros and how to get into ketosis, because that's cool. But I'm doing people a disservice if I don't tie in all the lessons on the mental and emotional side that I just talked about. And so Complete Keto really is about a complete transformation using a ketogenic approach. So yes, you're going to learn about keto and how to do it and your macros and all that stuff. That's cool. But on top of that is tips, tricks, and hacks on the mental and emotional side to help you actually make it into a lifestyle change. And whether you do keto or not isn't the most important thing. The principles in that second book, Complete Keto, really can be applied to any diet or a way of eating that you want to implement in your life. And so that's kind of Complete Keto in a nutshell. So if you want to learn more about the stuff that I just talked about, the mental and emotional side of transformation, and tying it into a physical guide of weight loss and how to do it in a ketogenic way, then Complete Keto is the book for you.
Love it. And if most of our audience probably is at least aware of the ketogenic diet, but high level, could you just kind of give some big bullet points in the case that an audience member is just not fully in tune with what it consists of?
Yeah. So here's the thing with keto. Every human on the planet has this ability to dip into or tap into a ketogenic state. If everyone here stopped eating for 3, 4 days, 5 days, most likely every single human is going to be in a ketogenic state. What does that mean? That means your body runs out of glucose, which is our main form of fuel for our brain, muscles, and organs and nervous system to function. But what happens when we run out of food or we're starving, right? We don't die after day 1 or day 2. We can actually go weeks, or some people months, without any food at all. How is that possible? It's because of something called ketosis, where our body finds an alternative fuel source by breaking down fat cells and converting them into something called ketones. And then ketones become the primary fuel source to fuel our brain, muscles, organs, and nervous system to function. And this is how our ancestors, this is how our species evolved, because, if we died after a day or 2 with no food, our species would have died off by now, right? Because we didn't have grocery stores.
Yeah, exactly.
we didn't have DoorDash back in the day, right?
No Uber Eats, what the heck, dude?
Yeah, so we have this amazing ability to tap into a ketogenic state and burning fat as fuel. And now, knowing that, there's 2 ways to get into ketosis. One is to starve yourself, which isn't fun, right? Mm-hmm. But the second way we discovered to dip into a ketogenic state was around the 1920s, is by eating a ketogenic diet, which is a high-fat, very low carbohydrate diet that forces your body to produce ketones. Even though you're eating calories, you're eating food, you're still able to achieve a ketogenic state. And they discovered this in the 1920s, which actually helped children that were drug resistant to the epilepsy medicine back then. Right. And it wasn't working. And so they figured that, hey, let's try this nutritional protocol. And it wasn't a weight loss protocol back then. It was like 80-90% fat, super unhealthy stuff too, that they put in these shakes that they had these kids eat. But for whatever reason, it still worked from a pure ketogenic state. And since then, it's evolved into something now where there's some major studies being done for all kinds of diseases. And, so keto in a nutshell is basically burning fat as fuel instead of carbs as fuel. And we can as humans, run off of 2 different types of fuels. So learning how to do both is very important and very essential, because we've kind of lost that. Because if you grew up in America in the 80s and 90s, most likely you were eating sugary cereal for breakfast, sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner, granola bars in between. So it's all based on the food pyramid, lots of carbohydrates. But not a lot of us have ever learned about keto or fasting and the benefits of that.
Now, one thing you talked about was the shakes and all that, and that was just like an anecdotal example from the 1920 case study. But what sort of supplementation, I guess, is part of the ketogenic diet, and specifically you use, Drew?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the biggest things that people don't know about is electrolytes. And what happens when you're in a ketogenic state, your body doesn't retain as much water, which is in a sense cool for people, because you lose water weight initially. Because when you eat glucose, your glucose needs water, and so you're going to absorb more or retain more water. But when you are eating mostly fat, you're not going to retain that water, so you lose a lot of water. But with that water loss, you're going to lose some minerals: potassium, sodium, magnesium, calcium, these kinds of things. And so replenishing those and supplementing with those on a ketogenic diet are essential to avoid what's called the keto flu. So this is what happens when you have an imbalance of electrolytes. So this is what happens when people go keto and they don't do any research. They just start eating butter, bacon, and cheese all day long, thinking like, oh, I'm keto. And they feel miserable, and they have headaches, and they're cramping, and they're lightheaded, and they're fainting. And people are like, oh, keto doesn't work for me. And now that we know more about this diet and what happens when you're in a ketogenic state, having salt on hand and, maybe magnesium to supplement with, in pill form, potassium as well, can really balance out those electrolytes so you don't have to experience the keto flu. So that's one hack that is mandatory on a ketogenic diet, supplementing with salt, and lots of salt too. Like, we're talking about like 5 to 7 grams per day. That's about 2 teaspoons of added salt in your food. Or sometimes if people have a headache and they're experiencing the keto flu, I'll have them take a half teaspoon of salt, just like a little shot, and then chug a bunch of water afterwards. And almost immediately that lightheadedness, the dizziness, the cramping of the muscles goes away almost instantly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Drew, I wasn't really even spun up on that as well. So thank you for that insight.
Yeah.
All right, the next big topic, and we kind of teed up Fit to Fat to Fit 1, but in following you, you went round 2, and I think you had it around your 40th birthday or something along those lines. So would love to take our audience down the journey of what that second looked like, and maybe were some of the differences and also some of the learning lessons that you went, and also why you did it. So would love to hear more.
Yeah, good question. So this was just like, last year, pretty much August of 2020, I decided to embark on this journey again a second time as a 40-year-old. Because in 2011, like I was mentioning before, social media wasn't what it is today. So not a lot of people saw it as it happened. They heard about it after the fact, or maybe they saw me on Jay Leno, but there was no Facebook Lives, there's no Insta stories, there's no really documenting, in the moment what was happening during the journey. And plus there was no way to really get my message out there. Like I said, I had maybe a few thousand followers, like, in the beginning. And then when I went on all these TV shows, at my peak, I got to 50,000 followers on Facebook, right? So not a lot of people actually saw it. And so I felt like there was this need to do it a second time because, like I said, I mentioned the word empathy before. I feel like the first time around, I learned empathy. I developed empathy for those that struggle. And now I felt like I had an opportunity, a chance to do it a second time with the message of driving home the importance of how important empathy is in this industry and why we need it now. Because if you remember back in 2020, this world was, well, it still is, but it was so divided with all the stuff that was going on with the riots and the pandemic, and it was crazy. And for me, empathy, what that means to me is listening to understand someone. The problem is, as a society, we listen to respond. We listen to judge them or critique them or correct them. Especially with social media, we see someone's post and we instantly judge them, and we write them off or we label them as this or that. And we lack empathy. And so I was like, man, I feel like now I'm being called to do it a second time because of the state of the world. And then also doing it as a 31-year-old is one thing. Right. Your metabolism's different, and I felt like doing it as a 40-year-old would give people in that age demographic some hope. Because I know it can be harder for a lot of people. It is harder as you get older.
Totally.
So I want to give people some hope and say, yes, it might be harder, but it's still possible. And so let's do this together. So I decided to embark on that journey a second time, but this time around, using all the social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook Lives, Insta Stories, like all the things, so that people could follow it every step of the way and really actually see it with a production team and, some people in place instead of me editing my videos and trying to upload it to YouTube back in the day was a nightmare. But anyways, those are the reasons why I did it. The only things that changed were a little bit of the format. So the first time I did it was 6 months of gaining, 6 months of losing. The second time I decided to do 4 months and 4 months because in between there, I had 2 seasons of a TV show called Fit to Fat to Fit, where we put other trainers through the same process so that they could become more empathetic. And
that was on A&E. That was on A&E, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on A&E. So we put other trainers through that process, and you can check it out. It's still out there. But anyways, that was the format of this show. And so we decided to follow that format, 4 months of gaining, 4 months of losing. So the second time around, I gained 62 pounds. The other difference is I did some experiments, some really cool experiments, because I did blood work throughout the whole journey and really wanted to highlight that part of it to show people what's happening on the inside of my body, not just the outside. So the cool experiments I did were I actually did a dirty version of 4 popular diets here in the US: keto, paleo, vegan, and vegetarian. And I did my blood work, and I did those diets for about a week at a time. And I did my blood work before and after to show the differences and what happens, because I wanted to show people that just because you're doing these popular diets does not mean you're going to be healthier, does not mean you're going to lose weight. So I kind of showed people the pitfalls and mistakes of these diets that people common mistakes that people make. So keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, I did all those in a very unclean way, if you will, and gained weight. And dude, my triglycerides went from like 40 something at the beginning, right, which is really good. And on dirty keto, even though it was keto, it's still, my triglycerides were still low, like 70. But then I went to paleo, so my triglycerides bumped up to 150. Ooh. Not horrible, but still not under 100 is good. And then from there, dirty vegan, the next time, it went to 400. Ooh. And then dirty vegetarian went over 500, my triglycerides. which is insane, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it just goes to show that a lot of people tend to gravitate towards comfort foods that are in those categories. So like, oh, I'm vegan, so you could eat Oreos, which are vegan, yeah, all day long. Lots of candy, lots of soda are vegan. Same thing with keto. There's keto ice cream and keto cookies and keto cakes. And people tend to gravitate towards the comfort foods, and it ends up messing up their health, and they don't lose the weight like they think, and they're like, well, this diet doesn't work, right? So that was kind of the different format that I did, different little experiments. And in the end, here, I'll say this. I was going into it a little bit cocky, thinking, oh, I've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
It was way harder than I bargained for. My girls were older, and so they struggled with, like, eating my food, and I didn't want them to eat my food, but they definitely snuck it in for sure. It was hard to control what they ate because they were older. And then the other thing, on a personal level, I went through a really hard breakup. I had a girlfriend at the time. I went through a divorce like years ago, 2015, and then got into a relationship. And during the middle of my journey, my second journey, went through a really hard breakup, and that was obviously devastating. And I definitely ate my emotions, which taught me a lot.
Many people do.
Yeah, it taught me a lot about the power of emotional eating and how real that is. Like, a lot of people just kind of brush that under the rug like it's no big deal, but dude, the emotional connection to food that we have is just like any other drug, because it's a similar chemical reaction in the brain that gives you this dopamine hit. And when you get these little dopamine hits, whether it's from food, drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, social media, whatever it is, it's a dopamine release in your brain, and your brain becomes addicted to that. Like, we want that high constantly, right? And Ben and Jerry's ice cream will do that. Some alcohol will do that. It relieves temporarily the pain, the emotional pain from life that you're experiencing. So it's breakup, divorce, finances, relationships, kids, like all kinds of emotional stress. And we want to numb that pain. And what's the most easily accessible drug? It's food. You can go buy it any time of the day. You can Uber Eats, DoorDash it, whatever it is, and it makes you feel good temporarily. And I experienced that firsthand. And man, that was freaking hard to overcome. It really, really was. And I see why people get stuck there. So I have a lot more empathy for people that struggle with that.
Dude, man, you're just a good guy, a good soul, and good on you. That provides you a lot of visibility and clarity. But obviously, you've been helping a lot of people in the process. So, a lot of gold here, my friend. Well,
thank you.
That in mind, I want to transition to the lightning round. You've been so respectful, or so gracious with your time, I should say. So I want to be respectful. We still have a few moments left, so I want to leave our audience with some big knowledge bombs, if that works for you.
Yeah. Cool. I'm ready.
Well, first and foremost, this is going to be a 2-part question, actually.
Okay.
With all the success that you've had to date, I actually want to pull under the kimono a little bit and talk about maybe one of the biggest challenges or setbacks that you've experienced in your business or life, and how'd you overcome that. So that's the first part, and the second part would be what's probably the biggest accomplishment to date.
That's a good one. I would say the hardest thing I've been through. I mean, there's a couple things, and I mentioned one of them was the breakup, but also the divorce. And I'll kind of tie them together, though, because those are two big things that happened. And the biggest lesson I've learned, or how I got out of those rock bottom moments, honestly, was learning how to love myself and become the hero of my own story. And I know that sounds a little bit weird, or I don't know what the right terminology is, but like, to do that is the ultimate way to save yourself from despair, from depression, is learning how to show up for yourself and becoming that hero of your story. Because like I said earlier, we're looking for that. We're looking for other people to do that for us. We're looking for someone to come save us. We're looking for, a loved one to just be the one and come, like, make us happy, or someone else, like our parents, to love us, or, our kids, or whatever it is. We're looking for these outside things to fill that void. And really, like, we never really end up finding that thing that does that for us, except when we learn how to show up for ourselves and truly learn how to love ourselves. And so for me, going through a divorce, going through a breakup, very similar situation, and hitting rock bottom and feeling depressed and, feeling like I'm going to be stuck there forever, is doing the work so that I can learn how to show up for myself. It doesn't mean I don't feel the pain. It doesn't mean I don't feel the depression. I let myself feel that for sure. But not letting myself stay stuck there. And this is what happens with the victim mindset, the victim mentality of people getting stuck there, blaming whoever's at fault for this, and staying in that. And I think that does disservice for you and for those around you, because you're not showing up as the best version of yourself. You hold that resentment, you hold that anger, that blame. It just weighs you down. You're the one that ends up suffering continuously until you learn how to let that go and give yourself that love that you've been missing your entire life. So that's the first thing that I would say of how I overcame that. The second question was about business, I believe, right?
It was just more, I wanted to kind of show that highlight the low light, or the challenge you went through. Also, on the flip side, what would be, through all your success, what's the biggest accomplishment to you to date?
Oh man, that's a good question. It's really hard because these accolades of like going on TV shows and doing Fit and creating a business, for me that doesn't equal success. For me, what equals success is living an authentic life where I can show up as the best version of myself authentically without caring what other people think. I think for me, that's a successful person, is being authentically happy, not caring what other people think, and living a life that is fulfilling to you. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter. So I would say for me, the biggest accomplishment to date is overcoming those challenges that I just mentioned before. Because if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't be the dad that I am. I have 2 daughters. And I know for me, that was my motivation to get myself out of the dark place, the rock bottom moments, was, do I want to pass this on to my kids? Do I want this resentment, this anger, this whatever, the shame, the guilt, do I want all of that unconsciously passed on to my kids? Or do I want to heal myself from that so that they don't have to suffer? And this is, healing generational trauma. And this is why, for me, it's so important. And it's one of my biggest accomplishments, because to do that is scary. It's hard. It takes a lot of courage. It's not easy. But for me, it's worth it, because I feel like if I don't do it, the same stuff that I went through, that I had to suffer from, is going to be passed on to my kids and the next generation and the next generation if someone doesn't learn how to break that cycle. So for me, I would say that's my biggest accomplishment, is learning how to do that, more so than going on TV shows or writing a book or, making a lot of money.
Good for you, man. And I think you're such a genuine, authentic guy, and like the way you come off. I mean, obviously, with all the success, but people are just attracted to you for that reason, which I love. So,
yeah.
Follow-up question on that. Yeah, you got it, buddy. Follow-up question on that would be, we talked about the accomplishment. From your perspective, what would be your zone of genius, your area of expertise that you do just inherently exceptionally well?
Yeah, I would say tying in the mental and emotional side of transformation into a physical transformation, because this is kind of what sets me apart. And we talked about this in the beginning of the podcast, is like, what sets you apart from everyone else? And for me, doing Fit, yes, that kind of set me apart, because not a lot of trainers or coaches are willing to do that, because it's risky and it's not easy. And I don't recommend people doing that. But for me, from all the lessons that I've learned, is really helping people tie in their mental and emotional transformation into a physical transformation, so that they aren't just losing weight thinking that's going to fix them, but they're really learning skills that shift their mindset, a new way of thinking, so that that physical transformation becomes a lifestyle change instead of just another diet that they do for a short period of time and then go back to their old ways.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Next up, passion. I feel like the successful people I interview on this show are typically passionate about something. What would you say, in your words, you're most passionate about today, and why?
That's a good question. There's a few things. I'll just be really quick about a few of them. One is being a dad. I'm passionate about being the best dad I can be. And then also I'm passionate about growth, about growing, upgrading, leveling up to become the best version of myself for, the next phase of life, because, there's no arriving and relaxing in this life. It's not like, okay, I did the work and now I'm done, I can relax. It's continuously working. And so for me, that growth mindset is something that I'm passionate about.
Amen. Next up, what scares you? And I know that's a little bit off the wall question, but want to again pull out that kimono. What would be one thing that just really keeps you up at night?
That's a good question. Okay, I'll be honest. Really, right now, temporarily, it is. I recently started surfing. And I suck at it. And surfing, every time I go out, man, I'm scared that I'm just going to get pounded by waves or cut up by the reef, or, not really scared of sharks, but I mean, I would be if there was a shark, but I'm showing up because I live in Hawaii. And so living in Hawaii, I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to surf. I don't want to become Kelly Slater necessarily, but I've never really learned how to surf. And so showing up every time I go out surfing is like, there's this fear, but I'm going out there and doing it. And so I think that's a big lesson for anyone, is like, find something that scares you, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that gets you out of your comfort zone, and do it. Even if you suck at it, like, just learn how to do it. And it doesn't have to be surfing, but for me, that's one thing that comes up.
Love it. And it ties into that growth mentality that, you should, and certainly I do, and our audience does as well. Next up, you are a world-class fitness coach, and give incredible advice. On the flip side, what has been one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever received, and why?
Man, okay, two things. One is, don't take things so personally. And I wouldn't say that's really like advice that I've been given, but it's lessons I've learned over the years from other people, whether it's their example or like reading the book, The Four Agreements. And I think a lot of suffering in this life is because we assume things, we make assumptions, we make up stories, and we start to believe those stories, even though they might not be true. And we take things so personally, to the point where we're so offended and we get so upset and angry. And so those are the two things that have really stuck with me over the years of, I guess, advice or lessons that I've learned. The other thing is a quote from Rumi that says, what you are aware of, you're in control of. What you're not aware of controls you. And for me, I'm like, that's so powerful, because like, if you can't figure out why you can't do something, like, why can't I just be consistent? Why can't I lose weight? Why can't I do this or do that, right? And we kind of beat ourselves up and shame ourselves. Mm-hmm. Self-awareness is the key to overcoming those things that we just can't figure out. And so going deep, doing the inner work and figuring out what is keeping us from doing these things that scare us, that's kind of, once we become aware of it, then we can control it, and then we can change that part about us. But until we become aware of it, it's going to keep controlling us. And so I think that's really deep, and that's really powerful for me.
Holy smokes. I've actually never heard that quote, but I'm going to be thinking
It's a good one.
that. Yeah, totally. All right, my friend. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
My next question is, I'm a big advocate that leaders are readers, and you certainly are a leader. What is a great book recommendation, or it could be a podcast or some sort of inspirational or educational content that has really served you that can help our audience?
Yeah, that's a really good book. Or that's a really good question. The book that comes to mind that I just recently read is a book by Oprah called What Happened to You? And I'll tie this into fitness and entrepreneurship in a second. But her book is about asking what happened to you. So instead of asking, like, what's wrong with this person? Why is this person broken? Why does this person do this? So maybe you have clients or people that you're working with. If you come from a place of curiosity, like, what happened to you? What experiences did you have that led you down this path to become who you are? Why do you struggle with these things? It allows you to develop some empathy and come from a place of curiosity and truly trying to understand someone. Because there's a quote by Brene Brown. She says, it's hard to hate someone up close. And what she means by that is, if you truly get to know someone and hear their stories and hear their experiences, it's really, really hard to hate them. You understand them on a deeper level where you're like, oh, that makes sense that you think the way you think. So if you want better relationships, better connections with your clients or your employees, that's, for me, a great book that really opened up my eyes to, wow, I need to start looking at it through a different lens, a different perspective of, like, what's wrong with these people? Why don't they just do this? Like, instead of judging them, ask, what happened to you? What led you down this path of who you are today, and why do you think that? And so I think for me, that's something that resonates and hopefully can help quite a few people.
Love it. All right, Drew, this has been incredible. My last question for you. You've added so much value today. I love podcasting. One, I get to bring on inspirational guests like you and be able to provide value to our audience, but selfishly, I'm here taking notes as well. My last question for you is just a parting piece of wisdom for our audience who are interested in fitness, in business, in entrepreneurship. What would be a parting piece of wisdom that will help them on their journeys to success?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what I'll say is, learn how the most important relationship in your life is your relationship with yourself, first and foremost. Because if you don't love yourself, if you come from a place of self-hate, all your other relationships are going to suffer because of that. So if you do the work to work on your relationship with yourself, first and foremost, you develop some self-love, some empathy for yourself, then everything is a reflection of how you see you. So all your relationships improve if you develop that steady, healthy relationship with yourself, first and foremost. And so for me, that's kind of, what I tell people, like the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror, that right there is the most important relationship in your life for all your other relationships. So don't pour from an empty cup. Pour from a cup that's full. And so dedicate yourself to doing the inner work, like I mentioned before, while you do the outer work. Like there's nothing wrong with working on yourself, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, while you work on yourself physically by, exercising and eating healthy food. It all ties together. And once you develop that self-love and you really develop a good relationship with yourself, all those other relationships are so much easier.
Gold, my friend. Drew, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate you. I know our audience does as well. And before we shoot off for today, would love to tee you up and really, get a point of connection where our audience can follow you or find you at.
Yeah, super simple. It's just fit_fit.com, or just fit to fat to fit, same spelling on all social media channels. So I like to keep it simple.
Love it. Well, Drew, I want to thank you. I've been really, really looking forward to this interview. And before we shoot, just want to acknowledge you. First and foremost, man, for the guy who you are, the way you show up, your authenticity, your transparency, your vulnerability. I've learned a lot, not only in our handful of encounters, but watching you from afar. And I got to say, man, you show up with all love, care, and compassion. And the biggest thing, especially being in the fitness industry, for a decade, I mean, there's a lot of bad actors and there's some good actors as well in the fitness industry, but holy smokes, man, you make us all better. So I wanted to thank you for being on the show and just really acknowledge you for the person that you are, and appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I'm super grateful. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, friends, I know you got a ton of value. Assuming that you did, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube and write us an awesome review on iTunes. That way you can keep producing this content for you for free. So that's all for today, and see you next episode. Again, thanks, buddy.